November 1945. A small town in southwestern Vermont. A 74-year-old man named Middlebury Rivers walks into the woods near Glastenbury Mountain to go hunting. He never comes back. December 1946. A college student named Paula Welden goes for a hike on the Long Trail, a popular hiking path that runs through the same area. She vanishes in front of witnesses. One moment she's walking up the trail. The next moment, she's gone. October 1949. An 8-year-old boy named Paul Jepson is playing near a family farm while his mother works. She looks away for a moment. When she looks back, he's gone. Search teams with bloodhounds track his scent into the mountains, and then it disappears, as if he was lifted into the air. October 1950. A woman named Frida Langer is hiking with her cousin. She slips and falls into a stream. She tells her cousin she's going back to their campsite to change clothes. Her cousin watches her walk away. Frida never arrives at the campsite, which is less than a quarter-mile away. December 1949. An experienced woodsman and hunting guide named James Tedford is riding a bus home to Bennington. Witnesses see him on the bus, sitting in his seat. The bus makes several stops. When it arrives in Bennington, Tedford's seat is empty. His luggage is still in the overhead rack. But James Tedford is gone. 5 people, 5 disappearances, all within a 15-mile radius, all within 5 years. No bodies are ever found. No evidence is discovered. No explanation is ever given. This area of Vermont, centered on Glastenbury Mountain, would become known as the Bennington Triangle, a place where people walk into the forest and vanish into thin air. Welcome to 404 Mystery Found, where we investigate history's greatest unanswered questions. So settle in. What you are about to hear is not a campfire story. These are documented forensic mysteries where every clue leads to a dead end, and every answer only raises a darker question. Act 1. The place, Glastenbury Mountain, and the Long Trail. Before we examine the disappearances, we need to understand the place where they happened, because location is everything in this mystery. The geography. Glastenbury Mountain sits in southwestern Vermont, part of the Green Mountain Range. It's approximately 3,748 feet high. Not a massive peak by Rocky Mountain standards, but significant for the northeast. The mountain is densely forested with old-growth hardwoods and evergreens. The terrain is rugged, steep ridges, rocky outcrops, and thick undergrowth. Visibility in the forest is limited to about 50 feet in most places. Running through this area is the Long Trail, a 272-mile hiking path that stretches the length of Vermont from Massachusetts to the Canadian border. It's the oldest long-distance hiking trail in the United States, established in 1921. The section of the Long Trail that crosses Glastenbury Mountain is considered one of the most remote and challenging. There are no towns nearby, no roads, no cell service, though that wasn't a concern in the 1940s. It's wilderness in the truest sense. In good weather, it's beautiful. In bad weather, it's treacherous, and it's easy to get lost. But that doesn't explain why people vanished without a trace. Glastenbury Mountain has a dark history long before the 1940s disappearances. The town of Glastenbury was founded in the 1760s. It was a logging town. Timber was the primary industry. At its peak in the late 1800s, the town had about 250 residents. But Glastenbury was plagued by tragedy. There were multiple murders, logging accidents, unexplained deaths, and strange stories. In 1892, a man named Henry McDowell murdered John Crewley with an axe during a logging dispute. McDowell was caught, tried, and sent to an asylum, where he died. In 1897, another logging camp worker went berserk and killed several co-workers before disappearing into the forest. His body was never found. By 1900, the logging industry had collapsed. The town's population dwindled. By 1937, Glastenbury was officially unincorporated, essentially abandoned. Today, the town no longer exists. It's a ghost town, reclaimed by the forest. The only remaining structure is the Glastenbury Wilderness area, protected forest where no development is allowed. And in the 1940s, this wilderness became the site of 5 unexplained disappearances. The Native American legends. The Abenaki people, the Native American tribe indigenous to Vermont, have their own stories about Glastenbury Mountain. According to Abenaki oral tradition, the mountain is a cursed place. They called it the place where the 4 winds meet, a place of spiritual power and danger. The Abenaki avoided the mountain. They used the surrounding valleys for hunting and travel, but they did not build permanent settlements on Glastenbury itself. They believed it was a place where the barrier between the physical and spiritual worlds was thin. When European settlers asked Abenaki guides why they avoided the mountain, the guides reportedly said it was a place where the stones are always moving and people disappear. Whether you believe in spiritual explanations or not, the fact remains, the Abenaki avoided this place for a reason. And centuries later, 5 people would vanish there under circumstances that defy rational explanation. Let's examine each disappearance in detail. Act 2, The Disappearances. Between November 1945 and October 1950, 5 people vanished in the Bennington Triangle. Each case is distinct. Each has its own strange details, but together they form a pattern that's impossible to ignore. Disappearance number 1, Middlebury Rivers. November 12, 1945. Middlebury Rivers was a 74-year-old experienced outdoorsman and lifelong resident of Bennington, Vermont. He'd been hunting in the forests around Glastenbury Mountain for over 50 years. He knew the area as well as anyone. On November 12, 1945, Rivers went hunting with a group of 4 other men. They split up to cover more ground, a common practice among experienced hunters. The plan was to meet back at their vehicles by late afternoon. Rivers was last seen at approximately 2 p.m. near the Long Trail, about 3 miles from the trailhead. One of his companions saw him walking into a thickly wooded area. When the group reconvened at 4:30 p.m., Rivers wasn't there. They waited. By 5 p.m., with darkness approaching, they began searching for him. They found his rifle leaning against a tree, approximately a quarter mile from where he was last seen. But Rivers himself was gone. A massive search operation was launched. Over 300 volunteers, including experienced hunters, trappers, and local law enforcement, combed the area for 2 weeks. They found nothing. No tracks, no clothing, no sign of a struggle, no indication of where he'd gone. Middlebury Rivers vanished as if he'd been lifted off the ground. The case remains unsolved. Disappearance number 2, Paula Welden, December 1st, 1946. This is the disappearance that made national headlines and brought the term Bennington Triangle into popular consciousness. Paula Jean Welden was an 18-year-old sophomore at Bennington College, about 5 miles from Glastenbury Mountain. She was a bright student, well-liked, with no known personal problems or reasons to run away. On the afternoon of December 1st, 1946, Paula told her roommate she was going for a walk on the long trail. She left campus around 2:30 p.m., wearing a red parka, blue jeans, and sneakers. She carried no backpack, no supplies. It was meant to be a short hike. Multiple witnesses saw her that afternoon. Let me walk you through the timeline. 2:45 p.m. A couple driving near the Long Trail trailhead saw Paula walking along the road toward the trail entrance. They recognized her red parka. 3 p.m. An elderly man named Louis Knapp saw Paula on the long trail itself, walking north. He was about 100 yards behind her. He watched her walk around a bend in the trail. 3:05 p.m. Knapp rounded the same bend, expecting to see Paula ahead of him on the trail. She was gone, straight for about half a mile. Knapp should have been able to see her, but she'd vanished. Knapp didn't think much of it at the time. He assumed she'd walked faster than he realized, or she'd stepped off the trail briefly. He continued his walk and returned home. When Paula didn't return to campus by evening, her roommate reported her missing. A search began immediately. By the next morning, over 400 people were searching the long trail and surrounding forest. The FBI was called in. Bloodhounds tracked Paula's scent from the trailhead to the exact spot where Knapp had last seen her. And then the scent disappeared. The search continued for weeks, then months. The state of Vermont offered a $5,000 reward for information. Private detectives were hired by Paula's family. Nothing was ever found. No clothing. No footprints leading off the trail. No body. Paula Welden walked around a bend in a hiking trail in broad daylight, with a witness 100 yards behind her, and vanished completely. The case has never been solved. Paula's disappearance remains one of the most baffling missing person cases in American history. Disappearance number 3, James Tedford, December 1st, 1949. This disappearance is arguably the strangest of the 5, because James Tedford vanished from a moving bus filled with witnesses. James E. Tedford was a veteran of World War II. In his late 60s, he lived at the Soldiers' Home in Bennington, Vermont, a facility for veterans. He was an experienced outdoorsman and former hunting guide. On December 1st, 1949, exactly 3 years to the day after Paula Welden's disappearance, Tedford went to visit relatives in St. Albans, Vermont, about 40 miles north of Bennington. That evening, he boarded a public bus in St. Albans for the journey back to Bennington. The bus made several stops along the route, picking up and dropping off passengers. Multiple passengers on the bus later testified that they saw Tedford sitting in his seat. He was wearing a dark coat and hat. He was carrying a luggage bag, which he placed in the overhead rack above his seat. One passenger, a woman sitting 2 rows behind Tedford, specifically remembered him because he was reading a newspaper and occasionally nodding off to sleep. The bus made its final stop before Bennington at approximately 6:30 p.m. When passengers reboarded after the stop, Tedford was still in his seat. The bus arrived in Bennington at 7:15 p.m. Passengers began exiting. The driver called out, asking if anyone needed help with luggage. It was then that someone noticed. James Tedford's seat was empty. His luggage was still in the overhead rack. His newspaper was still on the seat. But Tedford was gone. The driver was questioned extensively. He insisted the bus never stopped unexpectedly. All stops were scheduled, and the doors were within his view the entire time. He had no explanation for how Tedford could have left the bus. Fellow passengers were interviewed. None of them saw Tedford stand up, walk to the door, or leave. He simply wasn't there when the bus arrived. A search of the area was conducted. Investigators checked every stop along the route. They interviewed residents of the towns where the bus had stopped. No one ever saw James Tedford again. Disappearance number 4, Paul Jepson. October 12, 1950. Paul Jepson was 8 years old. He lived with his parents on a farm near Glastenbury Mountain. His mother worked as a caretaker for a local dump site, a common job in rural Vermont at the time. On the afternoon of October 12, 1950, Paul's mother brought him to work with her. Paul was playing near the entrance to the dump, while his mother worked inside a small office building. At approximately 3 p.m., she looked outside to check on Paul. He was gone. She immediately began searching the area, calling his name. When she couldn't find him, she contacted authorities. Within an hour, a search operation was underway. Bloodhounds were brought in to track Paul's scent. The dogs picked up a clear trail leading from the dump site directly into the forest, heading toward Glastenbury Mountain. The dogs followed Paul's scent for about 2 miles into dense forest, and then, suddenly, the scent vanished. The dogs circled the area, confused. It was as if Paul had simply ceased to exist at that spot. The search expanded. Over 200 volunteers, including state police and National Guard troops, combed the forest for days. Helicopters flew overhead. Ground teams searched every inch of terrain. They found nothing. No clothing. No footprints beyond what the bloodhounds had tracked. No sign of Paul. One detail haunted investigators. Paul's mother said that on the morning of his disappearance, Paul had asked if they could visit a specific mountain area where the man lived. When asked what man, Paul didn't elaborate. His mother dismissed it at the time. After Paul vanished, she remembered the comment. She told investigators, but they found no evidence of anyone living in the remote area Paul had mentioned. Paul Jepson was never seen again. Disappearance number 5, Frida Langer. October 28, 1950. This is the final disappearance in the Bennington Triangle, and in some ways the most disturbing, because Frida Langer's body was eventually found, but in a way that raised more questions than it answered. Frida Langer was 53 years old, an experienced hiker, and a resident of North Adams, Massachusetts. She and her husband Herbert were familiar with the Glastenbury Mountain area. They often camped and hiked there. On October 28, 1950, Frida and her cousin Herbert Elsner were hiking near Somerset Reservoir, about 5 miles from Glastenbury Mountain. They were following a trail back to their campsite. At approximately 3:30 p.m., Frida slipped and fell into a small stream. She wasn't injured, but her clothes were soaked. She told Herbert she was going to walk back to their campsite, less than a quarter mile away, to change into dry clothes. Herbert would continue gathering firewood and meet her there. Herbert watched Frida walk away on the clearly marked trail toward the campsite. She was visible for about 100 yards before the trail curved. Then she was out of sight. 15 minutes later, Herbert returned to the campsite. Frida wasn't there. He assumed she was delayed or had taken a different path. He waited. By 4:15 p.m., concerned, he began searching the area and calling her name. No response. By evening, he contacted authorities. A search was launched immediately, this time with even more urgency, given the string of disappearances in the area. The search was massive. Over 300 volunteers, helicopters, bloodhounds, military personnel. They searched for weeks. Nothing. The case went cold. And then, on May 12, 1951, 7 months after Frida disappeared, her body was found. It was discovered in an area that had been searched multiple times. The body was lying in an open, easily visible location near the Somerset Reservoir. Not hidden, not buried, just lying in the open. Here's what made it so disturbing. The body was in an area that had been thoroughly searched by multiple teams. Searchers had walked within feet of that location. How did they miss it? More importantly, the state of decomposition was consistent with the body being there for 7 months, exposed to weather, animals, and the elements. But the area where the body was found had been under heavy snow from November through April. If Frida had died there in October, her body should have been preserved by the cold and snow, and easily visible when the snow melted in April. Instead, it wasn't found until May, and the decomposition suggested it had been exposed the entire time. The cause of death was listed as exposure and hypothermia. But investigators couldn't explain how Frida died less than a quarter mile from her campsite, on a trail she knew well, in good weather, without any signs of injury or disorientation. And they couldn't explain why her body appeared in an area that had been searched repeatedly. Frida Langer's death marked the end of the Bennington Triangle disappearances. After October 1950, the vanishing stopped, but the questions never did. Act 3, the investigations and the theories. 5 people vanished. 1 body was eventually found, but under circumstances that explain nothing. 4 remain missing to this day. Over the decades, investigators, researchers, and amateur sleuths have proposed numerous theories. Let's examine them. Theory number 1, serial killer. The most obvious explanation: a serial killer was operating in the area between 1945 and 1950, targeting hikers and travelers. Evidence supporting this theory: all disappearances occurred within a 15-mile radius. All occurred within a 5-year period, then stopped. The victims were vulnerable, alone or separated from groups. Serial killers often target remote areas where bodies are difficult to find. Problems with this theory: the victims varied wildly. Elderly men, young women, children. Serial killers typically have a specific victim profile. How did James Tedford vanish from a bus full of witnesses? Why was Paul Jepson's scent trail tracked by bloodhounds for 2 miles, then vanish as if he'd been lifted into the air? Why did the disappearances stop abruptly after 1950? No bodies were found, except Frida, in suspicious circumstances. Serial killers usually leave bodies or evidence. Theory number 2, accidents and natural causes. The simplest explanation: these were tragic accidents. People got lost, fell into ravines, succumbed to the elements, and their bodies were never found because the terrain is so rugged. Evidence supporting this theory: Glastenbury Mountain is remote, heavily forested, and dangerous. Weather can change rapidly, leading to disorientation. Animals could have scattered remains. Rivers and streams could have carried bodies away. Problems with this theory: Paula Welden vanished in broad daylight with a witness 100 yards behind her. There were no ravines or drop-offs where she disappeared. Paul Jepson's scent trail vanished abruptly in the middle of the forest. Bloodhounds don't lose scent trails unless something disrupts them: water, strong winds, or the person being carried away. James Tedford vanished from a bus. That's not an accident. Experienced searchers found no evidence, no clothing, no footprints, nothing in areas where accidents should have left traces. Theory number 3, voluntary disappearance. Perhaps some of the victims chose to disappear, to start new lives, escape personal problems, or fake their deaths. Problems with this theory. Paul Jepson was 8 years old. He didn't run away. Middlebury Rivers was 74 and had no reason to disappear. Paula Welden left all her belongings, had no financial problems, and was happy at college. James Tedford left his luggage on the bus. Why? This theory might explain one disappearance, but not all 5. Theory number 4, wild animals. Could wild animals, bears, mountain lions, or feral dogs, have attacked and killed the victims, dragging their bodies away? Problems with this theory. No evidence of animal attacks was ever found. No blood, no torn clothing, no drag marks. Bloodhounds would have detected the scent of predators. Mountain lions were functionally extinct in Vermont by the 1940s. Black bears rarely attack humans and don't typically drag bodies away. Theory number 5, paranormal or interdimensional. This is the theory that gets the most attention, even if it's the least provable. Proponents of paranormal explanations point to the Abenaki legends about the mountain being a place where the 4 winds meet. Reports of strange lights in the sky above Glastenbury Mountain in the 1940s. The abrupt way scent trails vanished, suggesting the person was lifted, not walked away. The fact that Paula Welden disappeared in front of a witness with no place to hide. Some researchers have suggested interdimensional portals or thin places where the barrier between worlds is weak. UFO abductions. This theory gained popularity in the 1960s-70s. Time slips or temporal anomalies. Malevolent spiritual entities. The problem with paranormal theories: they're unfalsifiable. You can't prove or disprove them. They explain everything by invoking the unexplainable. Act 4. The pattern and the silence. What's most striking about the Bennington Triangle disappearances isn't just that 5 people vanished, it's the pattern. The pattern. All disappearances occurred between late afternoon and early evening, 2 p.m., 7 p.m. All occurred in fall or early winter, October to December. All occurred within a 15-mile radius of Glastenbury Mountain. All occurred over a 5-year period, 1945 to 1950. Then they stopped completely. After Frida Langer's body was found in May 1951, there were no more disappearances in the Bennington Triangle. Not in 1951, 1952, or any year after. Whatever was happening, whether human, natural, or otherwise, it stopped. The theories for why it stopped. If it was a serial killer, they either died, moved away, or were incarcerated for another crime. If it was natural causes, it was a statistical anomaly, a cluster of random tragedies. If it was paranormal, well, paranormal phenomena is said to come and go without explanation. The modern perspective. Today, Glastenbury Mountain is part of the Green Mountain National Forest. The long trail still runs through the area. Hikers use it regularly, and people still disappear in the wilderness, but not at the rate or in the manner they did between 1945 and 1950. In 2008, a researcher named Tyler Resch published a book analyzing the Bennington Triangle cases. His conclusion: most were likely accidents, compounded by poor search methods in the 1940s and the difficulty of the terrain. But even Resch admitted he couldn't explain James Tedford vanishing from a bus, or Paul Jepson's scent trail disappearing mid-forest. The truth is, we don't know. And we may never know. 4 bodies are still missing. 4 families never got closure. 4 people walked into the wilderness or onto a bus and simply ceased to exist. The mountain remains. In 1992, the town of Glastenbury officially had a population of 0. It remains unincorporated to this day. The mountain is wilderness. The forest has reclaimed everything. If you hike the long trail through that area today, you'll pass by Glastenbury Mountain. You'll walk the same trail Paula Welden walked. You'll see the same dense forest where Paul Jepson's scent trail vanished. And if you know the history, you'll feel it. A sense of unease. A feeling that you're being watched. A subtle wrongness in the air. The Abenaki people were right. Glastenbury Mountain is a strange place. Not evil, perhaps, just other. 5 people vanished there in 5 years. 4 were never found. 1 was found in a place that had been searched a dozen times, her body appearing as if placed there deliberately. We don't know what happened. We have theories, but no answers. We have witness testimony, but no evidence. We have families who grieve for decades without closure. Somewhere on Glastenbury Mountain, in the deep forest, there might be answers, remains, clues, or maybe there's nothing. Maybe the forest simply swallowed them, and they're gone forever. The Bennington Triangle remains one of the most baffling series of disappearances in American history. A place where the forest is too quiet, the trails feel wrong, and people who walk in don't always walk out. You've been listening to 404 Mystery Found. Thank you so much for tuning in this far. Subscribe so you won't miss our next mystery. Until next time.